This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
As followers of Jesus, in whom all things were made, we acknowledge the Darug people as the traditional custodians of the country on where this podcast is recorded. We recognise their continuing connection to the land and waters and thank them for protecting this land and its ecosystems since time immemorial. We pay our respects to elders past, present and future, and we extend that respect to all First Nations peoples listening today. I'm Georgia and welcome to Finding Hope, the podcast that reminds you of the good in the world. Each episode tells a story of someone who has found real hope in challenging times and made the world a better place. Episode 56, Tori Hope Peterson. Tori Hope Peterson is the best-selling author of Fostered and a sought-out speaker, inspiring audiences to be resilient, suffer well, and change the world with what they have right where they are by loving the people in front of them, which I love. Tori is a wife, a foster mum, adoptive mum, and biological mum, and works with organisations all over America advocating for foster care reform, adoption awareness, and help with vulnerable populations. She also founded the Beloved Institute, a non-profit where in community people learn how to become professional lovers of people. And she joins me all the way from the US right now. Tori, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy.
I just love the phrase professional lovers of people. How do we love people like it's our job?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it becomes easy to love people when we understand that we are so loved, right? Especially when we've experienced maybe feelings or really real life times when we aren't loved. We don't want anyone else to feel the depravity, the heartache, the hurt of not belonging, of not knowing who they are. And so I think it's twofold. It's like this, I think we become really motivated to love people really well when we've missed out on love or it's missed us some way. And then when it's hit us and we've seen the gift of it.
And I feel like that represents almost the story of your life. You love people so well, and yet that hasn't always been shown to you. Take me back to the beginning. How much do you kind of remember of your childhood? What was that like?
My first memory was, I think I was like 3 or 4. You know, you don't have a concept of time or of age when you're so young. But uniformed men busted through my front door and they started to take bags of drugs down from the wardrobe, the cupboards, and they're like, "Do you know what this is?" And I was just like shrugging my shoulders. I didn't know what it was. I knew that it was my mom's business, and I knew that it's what sustained our family in some sense. I don't think I could have used those words, but I knew. And then a woman just came and swooped me up, took me to the backyard, and then I went into my first foster home. My mom, she went through a lot when she was a girl, and I think that she did everything she did because she wanted what was best for me. She just didn't quite know how to get there. And so I was actually reunified with my mom. My mom worked her case plan, I think, very diligently and determined to have me back. And so I went back with my mom. We reunified. But then when I got older, my mom struggled greatly with mental illness. And so I went back into the foster care system when I was an adolescent, this time with my sister. She's 9.5 years younger than me. And this time was very much different. I think the first time I was like, I don't really want to. I didn't want to go into the foster care system. I wanted to be with my mom. I didn't think the way we were living was dysfunctional or bad. It was just the way we lived. And I was never abused or hurt. But as I got older, the abuse in our home started to get worse. And so when the foster care system came in the second time, I was actually pretty relieved, happy. I was like, this is mine and my sister's opportunity to maybe have a family, to have normalcy, to just not live in the chaos and the hurt that we were. but just within a month of living there together, my sister and I were separated. That was really, really hard because we were separated because I spoke up about abuse and I was deemed a liar. And after you're kind of deemed a liar about abuse in the foster care system, no other foster parent wants to take you because they don't want to take the risk of being labeled, an abuser. Or it was really sad because I spoke up because I wanted to keep my sister safe. And then when we were separated, it felt like if I just would have been quiet, then I would have kept her safe. So I went to go live in a residential group home. And throughout my entire time in foster care, I moved throughout 12 homes total before I emancipated the day I turned 18. And I chose to emancipate in America. There has been kind of this idea in America that once a kid turns 18, they're kicked out of the foster care system. And that's not true. We have extended foster care. We've probably had that for over a decade now. And we have extended foster care. It means to give stability and security to children aging out, to children becoming adults, aging out of the system. But a lot of kids, the thing is, the confusion comes, it's like, well, why are all these kids aging out and they don't have stability or they're still homeless? And that's because a lot of kids who are becoming adults feel burned by the foster care system. So they choose to emancipate. And that's what I did. I chose to leave the foster care system.
I just think of little teenage you've got 15, 16-year-olds, your classmates, probably thinking about their future, college, have that security of not having to worry about, if they're going to have a roof over their head that night. Were you able to think about the future at all? Was there kind of that sense of hope and dreaming, or was there just a sense of like, let's just get through the next day, the next week, the next month?
Yeah, it was a mix. I think thinking about the future was actually my survival mechanism. So I think that I was in a survival mode, but I think that it was dreaming past what I was going through that gave me the hope to continue to keep going. So something that my mom did a lot of things well. I think that she just always, as a woman, I felt like I never had to make myself smaller. I was never less than because I was a woman. And my mom made me feel like even as a girl, I could grasp on to any dream and do anything. And the only thing that my mom wanted for me, I feel like what my mom wanted for me more than anything else was for me to be an educated woman. And so college was something that I actually did think about from a very young age, because it was something that I think more than anything else, that was what my mom valued. So like, my husband and I, we are Christian. We care about our faiths very much. And so I would say like the number one thing we talk about in our home is our faith. Like we want our children to know and follow Jesus. But like for my mom, it was like, you have to be educated. You have to go to college. And so that really was a value of mine from a very young age. Like I wanted to be an educated woman, wanted to go to college. And so I didn't know exactly how I was going to do that. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. I don't know how it is there, but in America, you're responsible to pay for university. And so, I was like, I don't really know how I'm going to do that. There are grants that are given to youth in foster care, but it typically doesn't cover like all of tuition, room and board, especially to go to a good school. And so in between my junior and senior year of high school, my track coach actually was like, Tori, I think you can go onto the state track meet and I think you can win it. And that was a little absurd because I had never been to the state track meet in an individual race. Usually it's progressive, like your freshman year, maybe you make it to state, but you don't make it to finals. You don't place at all. And then your second year, maybe you make podium, but it's lower. And then, your junior year, maybe you place higher on the podium, like second or third, or maybe even fourth. And then like your fourth year, maybe your senior year, you win or you place higher. And so I'd never been to state. Like I'd never even been to the meet. I never even qualified for the championship. So it was like, it's a pretty big dream, but I think it was so tangible and so clear that I was like, okay, that could be cool. And quite honestly, I had nothing to lose. I had nothing else to do. Foster care was quite isolating because I didn't have a lot of friends, because the way the foster care system works, it's a little bit better now because some something that's called the Normalcy Act has passed because kids like me were sharing this stories like these. But in some counties, it's still pretty bad. But I couldn't go to friend's house. I couldn't like do anything unless their parents had proof of license, insurance, background check, and fingerprints. And when you ask, like, people are like, hey, you want to come sleep over? Or like, hey, you want to come to like over to my house for an hour? And I'm like, yeah, I need your parents to do fingerprints. People are like, what? That's weird. So, so because of that, I didn't have a lot of friends. And track became just this outlet for me. It was the thing that I was like, I could do it. No one needed fingerprints or background checks. I could just go after school and run. And I think my caseworkers knew that it was a good outlet for me. My foster mom, she would go to every practice and sit with me, especially when it was just me and my coach one-on-one. And through that, I built a really strong relationship with my track coach. So after I emancipated out of care, I was kind of bouncing around from home to home. I had a woman from my church take me in for a little bit, but we knew it wasn't like a permanent thing. And my track coach was actually driving me home from track practice, because another thing is, so in America, you can get your license at 16, but when you're in foster care, you can't, because it's considered a liability.
What?
Yeah, so you can't drive until you emancipate out of the foster care system. So I didn't have my license. I'd never like done any practice driving or like driver's ed driving, nothing like that. And so the adults in my life were just still driving me around everywhere while I was trying to obtain my license. And while my track coach was driving me home, he just said, hey, I talked to my daughters and we would like to invite you into our family. And he said, after the track season is over, we would like you to move in. And so a few months had passed. We were getting closer. And I became a 4-time state champion in track and field. I was the 50th girl in the history of Ohio to win 4 state titles in one track meet. I was the first individual woman state champion at my high school, the first person of color at my high school to be a state champion. And then that day, I moved in with the man who is still my dad. He is the grandparent to my children, and he's one of my dearest friends.
That's so beautiful. I'm so glad. Now, it was around that time also that you also were saved, right? Can you tell me about that story? Because that is such a life-changing thing.
Yeah, it really was, I think, the combination of my track coach believing in me that gave me confidence, and I think my growing confidence in learning who God said I was. For so long it was like I felt like nobody wanted me, and I always questioned, like, is there something detrimentally wrong with me? Or like, why don't people want me? Why don't people love me? And then understanding like what God said about me, I think just those two pieces of confidence is what allowed me to go on and be the athlete that I was. And I came to Jesus. I was honestly very skeptical of God for a very long time. I was first for intellectual reasons. I really enjoyed reading philosophy and religion, different religions, and understanding how people got to the conclusions that they did. And then I think after reading so much, it just kind of was glaring that I couldn't deny who God was, and especially who he was to me. And so, and then, I was like, there's most definitely God. And then as my foster mom was continuing to take me to church, the other question I had was, if God is so good, if he's so loving, then why have I suffered so much? And why do other kids, like kids who are way more innocent than me, why have they suffered even more? And as I understood the life of Jesus, I understood that it was a life of suffering, that he lived a life of suffering, and then he died on the cross, which was the greatest act of suffering. And so the hope that we can find in our suffering is that it's never wasted, because Jesus is the most egregious act of suffering in history gave God the most glory that he's ever had. And so I think for that reason, I started to understand that my suffering wasn't all this bad, that it was a gift. Like my suffering was actually a gift because it was a means to glorify the God that had given me life, that had given me family, that had given me this testimony to share and bring other people hope. And then I think the last question I had was, you always hear God referred to as Father. And I think when you don't have a strong father figure, you're like, it doesn't really make sense. Like this God who everyone's saying is loving and kind and comforting and almost like nurturing, he didn't give me that in real life, like in my physical worldly life. If he's that, then why wouldn't he have given me that? And it was we were singing a worship song in my church, and I think it was really the lyrics are, "You're a good, good father," and I was like, oh, it just kind of like clicked. I was like, he's my father. He's the father that I've been searching for, and he's the father that's been here all along, and I'm his daughter. And so I think when I really held on to that identity, when I grabbed onto that, the identity as daughter, I think that's when a lot of bitterness, anger, sadness started to chip away. And it's still there sometimes, but less and less as I understand my identity in Christ.
I love that there's nothing wrong with being saved as a young child. But I love that you'd studied it all and you'd still come to the conclusion that you needed to know more about God. And I really love that. It makes for a deeper connection.
Yeah, I think the thing in me, there is always kind of like this rebel or this fighter. I always have wanted to kind of go against the grain, and I feel like in my search for God, it just wasn't working. In my attempt to understand more and know it all, I just kept finding Jesus. I kept finding God. And it is so, I like that too. I like that I have something that a foundation that I can stand on, a means to explain him. But also, now, if I didn't, that would be okay too. Like my faith is enough. And I love that too. I often think about, the woman laying on the hospice bed and a priest comes to her or a pastor comes to her, and she has like 10 minutes left until she passes, and he's like, do you just want to accept Jesus into your life? This is who he is. And she's never read a word of the Bible, and she just says yes. I think about that all the time, because even that's enough. And it's just so cool that God himself just is enough.
You went to college, you became one of the 3% of foster youth to graduate from college. That statistic absolutely just blows me away. Incredible effort from you. What did you study?
I majored so I started majoring in psychology. And then when I started to get to my upper level classes, and I believed in Christ at this time, and I was just trying to learn more about faith. And so when you are learning about psychology, when you're studying psychology, everything is about the brain. Like it's like your mind controls everything. And I was like, well, what about the Holy Spirit? Like, where does he play a role in all of this? And then it was my junior year. I decided to change my major to Christian studies, and I had to put all these classes into like a semester or a year and a half, 3 semesters. So I ended up with a Christian studies major and a psychology minor. I was like 2 classes away from a double major, but I couldn't squeeze any more classes in besides the Christian studies major that I decided last minute. And I'm actually going back to school this fall. I haven't told anybody that yet. But I'm going to go get my master's in theological and biblical studies. I said I was never going to go back after undergrad. I was like, I'm never going to go back to school. Undergrad was really hard for me. But then just a really good opportunity came and presented itself. So here we are going back and doing something I said I would never do.
I feel like it's also, if you put enough time and distance between like something that was really hard, you can kind of just be like, oh, you kind of get nostalgic for it.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, Tori, you're also an incredible advocate for foster children and youth. You're a foster parent yourself, and look, I imagine the foster system is a little different between America and Australia, but I assume the challenges are the same. What needs to be done to better care for foster children and youth?
Well, I don't know how it is in Australia, but I think in America, there just needs to be a perspective change. That's what would greatly change the system more than anything else. I think it's really sad, but in general, people kind of look like we look at the system and we're like, it's too broken. We look at the kids and we're like, it's too troubled. We look at the parents and we're like, it's too messed up. And nothing gets fixed that way. Like, nothing gets fixed if we say it's a lost cause. We have to look at something and say, it's redeemable, and I want to play a part in that. We have to look at people as children of God, and we have to look at broken systems as an opportunity for us to glorify God, for us to bring light into, for us to bring restoration. So I think the first thing above, if we just change our perspective, we would engage in the foster care system dramatically differently. And I think that would cause a great wave of change, because what we really need is foster parents, more people involved. We in America, we say we don't have orphanages, but I always throw America under the bus. That's a lie. We have group homes. We call them group homes. They're modern day orphanages. They're definitely, typically, they're more ethical than, like your orphanage back in the day, but they're still orphanages. And I think, the research has shown that that's called, congregate care, or group homes. The research has shown that when kids live in there, it affects them negatively. And that makes complete sense, because God designed us, created us to be in family. And so when we're living in a space and place where there's rotating staff and these systems in place that don't allow us to connect with people the way that God intended for us to, then it is going to psychologically hurt children who are already so vulnerable, who have already been through so much trauma. So, we need people to look at the system differently, so they'll get involved, so they will become foster parents. And if you can't become a foster parent, there's so many other things. Be a mentor, be a core advocate, be with whatever, and if you're in a position where you can serve children, find the foster kid, find the kid that comes from a really broken home, and take time with them. Because that's really what my track coach did to me. He wasn't a foster parent. That's what a lot of people did. A lot of the people who had the biggest impact on my life weren't foster parents. They were really ordinary people who decided to just love me with what they had.
You also believe the church has a pivotal role to play for foster children, and to heal trauma with love and acceptance, something that the church historically hasn't been the best at. How can the church be more radically loving and accepting?
Well, I think that it first starts with, like I said, changing that perspective. So we as Christians, we as a church, we have the Holy Spirit that literally dwells within our very being, which means we have the power to step into the most broken of places and make them whole. We have the power within us to step into the most hurting of spaces and bring healing to them. And I think, we talk so much, I think in the church, we talk a lot about identity. Like, when you really know that you're loved, then this is how you'll live. Like, you won't be insecure. You'll have confidence. But I think the same is true when you know that the Holy Spirit dwells within your very being. When you know the power that you have, you're not scared of broken systems. You're not scared of corruption. You're not scared of being hurt, because you know who your healer is.
I love that so much. I think that's such great advice. Tori, there's so much I could talk to you about. I would love to share a little bit about your husband, Jacob. You've been married for 5 years. You've got 3 kids together. How did you meet?
We met our senior year in college. And yes, he is the foundation of our home, I'm the flighty one. I'm the one that has to literally flighty. I'm the one that has to jump on planes and, retreat to write books or do podcasts. And I'm here and there. And he's just so steady. And I'm really grateful. In some churches, there's the culture of really the woman is smaller or the woman is less. And my husband has always seen me as equal, and he doesn't let me do ministry. He supports me wholeheartedly, and he's my biggest cheerleader. I love him a lot. I am more of who God has created me to be because of him.
I also love there's a line on your website that since you moved into your very first apartment that Jacob just avidly buys chairs. I love that image so much. It's just always been just that giving kind of just opening the doors to everyone.
Yeah, I can literally think about, there are like these chairs right now in our doorway that I don't like. And I just asked him, I walked in and I was like, it's like a hospital chair. I'm like, where'd you get this chair? And he's like, I got it off the side of the road. I'm like, babe, it looks like a hospital chair. Like, it looks like you just stole that from the doctor's office. He's like, I thought it was great. Yeah, that's literally still his thing.
That is so fun.
I try to remember. It's a really sweet, I think it's a really, really sweet symbol of his heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, you're a mum of 3. You've got 2 biological kiddos and an adult adoptive son. Am I right in that?
Yes. And we have 2 foster children right now, 6 and 2.
Oh, amazing. Such a busy house. You need all those chairs. Do you feel, I don't know if pressure is the right word, but I guess you're a lot more intentional with your parenting than I guess you would have been if you hadn't grown up in the foster care system?
Yeah. I think a lot about being who I needed. So I asked myself a lot, what would 2-year-old Tori need? What would 4-year-old Tori need? What would 6-year-old Tori need? And yeah, I do think that I parent intentionally because I understand the consequences of not parenting it intentionally, I guess, or the effects, the harm that not being gentle with our kids can be. And I think I just really, I hope, I have no idea what my kids are going to. I think a lot too, I tell the story of my childhood. And I do think a lot about my kids someday will tell the story of their childhood. And I hope, they say she was a good mom.
You've got, 4 young kiddos in your house right now. What are the challenges of parenting an adult son? Because that would be completely different, especially, you're only in your mid to late 20s right now. There wouldn't be much of an age gap.
Yeah, not much of an age gap. And it's not so much parenting as it is mentoring. And then, you just don't have a lot of control. You don't really have any control. We've never really had control. Which I know, everyone's God's in control. But when you have littles and they're with you from birth, you do. You have control in the way that you nurture them. And just like any, adopted youth or foster youth, I think I can speak, and I'll speak on all of our behalf, but I speak on mine, that it can be really hard to accept love. And I think that can be difficult, but at the same time, I just remind myself that I'm just receiving a lot of the things that I dished out to my track coach and all the people that tried to love me, and just remaining faithful and hopeful of the future.
I love that. Tori, it's quite remarkable what you've achieved at such a young age. You're a renowned speaker. You've got your not-for-profit beloved institute. You also won Mrs. Universe in 2021. I don't understand how you have the time to do all of this. This is incredible. Why did you decide to enter? Because beauty pageants, I feel have, I don't know, somewhat of a stigma of being fake. And you seem like a very authentic person. So I would love for you to debunk the stigma if that's the case.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to be debunking any stigmas. But first, I really, really appreciate you saying that. I like when people kind of question the inconsistency of pageantry in me, because I do think it is inconsistent. But someone just presented me with the opportunity, and my husband and we had 5 kids, 3 and under at the time, so fostering a sibling group of 3. And it was just like mom sweats every day, not doing your hair or your makeup. I had just written my first book, Fostered. And so after you write your first book, it just goes into editing, and the editing process takes a little bit. Like your hands are off of it, and I was like, oh wow, I don't like really have anything to do. And every night when I laid my head down to bed and I took like that big sigh, I was like, wow, like getting dressed up and doing my hair and makeup would actually be really fun. I've always had my competitive streak because of track. And I did. I was like, but pageantry is really superficial. And it just didn't seem like me. But I was like, one of the things that I feel like I value about myself is that I'm not very judgmental. Like I say, don't look at the foster care system and judge it if you haven't stepped into it. And then that's what I was doing with pageantry. I was, like, I'm not going to jump into that because it's superficial and it's bad. But I'm like, oh, well, I've never actually done it. And a lot of the women who do it, speak very highly of it. And so I was like, it sounds fun. I love competition. Nothing better to do. I mean, other than I'd be with these 5 kids and I was tired of them. So I was like, let's go dress up. And I think there was like this little girl in me, that was like, let's go dress up and do my makeup and my hair and be competitive again. And so I did it, and it was really fun. Loved being competitive. I had a coach who was super intense and reminded me of my track coach. And that was fun. It was just I think something that I can still get really caught up in is working for God. Like I'm like God's slave or something. And during this time, I feel like I heard God say, work with me. Like, just work with me. Like, just hold my hand. Let's do something fun together. And so, yeah, all that, was kind of like this way that the pageant came about. And I'm, like I said, not going to debunk any stereotypes. They're all true. They're all true. And I would be very careful to ever let my daughter do a pageant. I would have to know that there's different systems. So like some are definitely better than others. And I would have to definitely know the system really well. I didn't know when I went into it that there were like different systems. I thought like, what if you did a pageant? That was like the pageant of all pageants. But yeah, I'm not against it. I think that it, especially when you're like a teenager, could be really beneficial. Because you learn public speaking, you learn interview skills, stuff that you really don't learn until you like have a very professional job. And so there are totally a lot of benefits to it, but I definitely think it's a place to be careful because women are very easily torn apart, and the things that are valued are superficial to the point where it could be harmful.
Tell me about your book. You are a best-selling author of Fostered. What do you hope people get out of it when they read it? I've already seen so many fantastic reviews, so I know that there are people out there but why did you write it? What do you want people to get from it?
It's so funny because you asked that question and like, it's evolved. Like I wrote it because I wanted the kid in foster care. Like I wanted, the 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old in foster care to know that they weren't alone, to know that they could overcome and get through the really hard things. And then the book became like this resource for foster parents, foster care professionals, psychologists. Like it became this resource, which I never would have been like a memoir is a resource, but that's what, by the grace of God, what it became. And then it became this thing that God used to get people involved in foster care. I get messages nearly every day about people telling me, I picked up, it's been out for about a year now. And, I picked up your book about a year ago and now we've had 2 foster care placements, or, just like these little testimonies of getting involved, or I picked up your book, I read it, and now I advocate for kids in court. And so, and now just recently, I feel like it's helping other people tell their stories. It's helping other people speak up and process what has happened to them in a way that makes them feel like they don't have to have shame. And so I feel like I wrote it with a very simple, like, I just wanted to tell people that God loves them, especially kids in foster care. But now I know that I don't know if this is why I wrote it, but I know it was written for many more reasons.
Look, Tori, I'm just blown away by how you've continued to find hope. You've been in the trenches a lot in your life. And I just would love to know if there's people listening out there that are in those trenches that can't quite grasp on to the hope of the future. What advice would you give them? What encouragement?
This is so simple. When I was a kid, I remember being in foster care and I would be like, I can't wait to emancipate, can't wait to be 18. And adults would come to me and they would be like, oh, just wait. Like, everything's going to get worse. You're going to have to pay bills. Marriage is hard. Kids are hard. You just wait. And that would really discourage me because I would be like, I don't know if I can take anything that's harder than this. When I was like in foster care, there were just really dark days. And I was like, I don't know if I can handle anything harder. And so it really discouraged me. But what I would want to leave people with is that it does get better. So don't listen to like the naysayers. Don't listen to the people who are just perpetually negative. And then those people who might lean towards being a naysayer, maybe try and speak words of life for people, especially when they're going through some really hard things.
I love that advice. And what a perfect note to end on. Tori Hope Peterson, it has been such an honor to have you on Finding Hope today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Tori Hope Peterson for sharing her story today. For more on Tori's book and work, you can visit her website, torihopepeterson.com, or follow her on Instagram at Tori Hope Peterson. And that information is in the show notes. I'm Georgia, and thank you for listening today. To help this podcast reach more people, you can rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening, and you can share it with a friend who might need a little bit of extra hope right now. For now, I'll leave you with this verse. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. John chapter 15, verse 12. Catch you next time.
This is a Hope 1032 production. Thanks for listening.